So your church is trying to get into digital ministry and you're not sure what camera to get. Well, we don't know either, but we're going to talk about it anyways.
Welcome to the Vlog Pastors Podcast, a podcast all about the stories and strategies of sharing God's love in the digital world. Now, here are two pastors that love to put a camera in their face and walk around in public. They are the Buzz and Woody of digital ministry, Jarrod Brown and Joshua Verwers.
Hey everybody, I am Joshua Verwers.
And I'm Jarrod Brown, and this is episode 64.
And whether you are joining us here in the live stream or catching us on a replay, we just want to welcome you to the podcast today.
And if you come here every Wednesday at 10:30, you can help shape the conversation and kind of let us know what we're doing for the day, because we don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened today, because we had just titled this episode as we're going live, Stuff and Things. And Diana Gladney called us out and says, nope, that's not happening on the podcast today. Pick a topic.
No.
So
Solid
she told us we needed to pick a topic, that we couldn't just do whatever we felt like it's, our podcast if we wanted to.
Like it was our show. My goodness.
Fine. I guess that's what we get for allowing, audience participation.
Needs to be interesting. Needs to be trendy. What your audience wants. Well, who cares about what the audience wants?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we just wanted to run to infinity and beyond today.
There was a snake in my boots. That's why we got started late.
Yeah.
All right.
But to be completely honest, we do probably have a little bit of insight and knowledge as small church pastors that do digital ministry as to what you ought to be looking for camera gear.
And that's because we've done it wrong over and over. Well, maybe not wrong, but
Canon M50 was wrong. M50
How was Canon
wrong.
M50 wrong?
Canon M50 was wrong. You want to know how they're wrong?
Oh, yeah, I want to know how they're wrong.
They wanted to neuter things and make sure that you couldn't record any more than 29 minutes and 59 seconds.
But that's just Canon. And that is where I made my first mistake. I went
Canon?
all into Canon. I was ready to die on that hill. I went in on a system that was just the culture. We've talked about this time and time again, man. The culture of Canon with them trying to limit. And that's where I realized that I'm going to be investing in businesses that just want to push the limits, like Sony.
Right. And for those that would be watching this video live or replaying, what you are seeing right here, this lovely view of me, is on the Sony a6600 with the Sigma 16mm lens on it. And then over there for Jarrod, what are you rocking over there?
I have the Sony a7S III, and I'm not sure, a Tamron lens of some sort, maybe a 16 to 70. What do they have? 18 to 70, 93 to whatever it is. It's a zoom.
And that would be like the f2.8 version.
F2.8, yeah.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, maybe is yours the 28 to 70?
Oh, that sounds right. Yes, 28 to 70.
28 to 70 f2 Tamron.
F2.8,
It was the one that I really wanted, and then they came out with the 17 to 70. Or yours is the 28 to 75, and they came out with a 17 to 70. And then I was like, ooh, maybe I want that instead, and I just haven't bought anything. But so all that to being said, yes, full disclosure, we are on Sony right now. However, both of us came over from Canon. And prior to even Canon, here's a little known fact. Some of the first videos I ever recorded for our church was on a Nikon.
Ooh. And I've dabbled a little bit in Panasonic. Did some weddings on a Panasonic. It was a ride.
So it sounds like the only things that we aren't going to be able to really speak on would be Fuji and Blackmagic. Like that's about the main small form cameras that you could potentially be looking at. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, I want to talk about this, Jarrod, but I want to talk about it in such a way that instead of us coming right out the gate and telling everybody that they should buy the FX30 when it drops later this month, instead of us saying you're going to want to buy the FX30 because it is the bee's knees and it is basically a unicorn camera. Instead of us saying buy the FX30. Instead of us saying that,
Sure.
what we want to do is give them things to think about when they're looking for the camera,
Right.
which all of these things may or may not be in the FX30, which is supposed to release later this month, if I didn't mention that
absolutely.
already. So first and foremost, we're talking about digital ministry. Okay. So digital ministry, that's what we do. And it is video first. Like that's one of the big things that when we sit there and we're looking at that, what we're going to be doing, obviously we're going to want to put video out there. Every single platform is going video first. If you didn't notice that already because you're still on Facebook, you should have noticed that already, because when you try to post your Facebook status update that is just typed out, you ever notice how people complain that Facebook is suppressing their ideas? No, it's people just don't want to read your stuff. However, if you put a picture, or even better, a video with it, everybody sees it because people respond more. We are visual creatures. We have these eyes that we're supposed to see things and look at, and we're visually stimulated. So every platform is heavily moving towards video first. Even the photo app of Instagram is now a video first platform. I think they even said that recently, didn't they?
Yeah, whether they want to or not. To much the chagrin, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
To the photographers out there, and we're also we're kind of speaking to the smaller, the smaller teams and the smaller churches out there, because if you have a full-on production team, then maybe you're interested in the FX30, maybe that helps you out, but you're probably going to be pushing on into you didn't come across this video and go, oh man, what do I need to know about how to get into digital ministry? So if you're the one-man band, or you have a couple of volunteers who are helping you out with video, hopefully we're going to dive into some topics today that can help you out.
Yeah. So starting off, when we're talking video and video first, and of course, coming from small church sizes and small church, I think in the last couple of years, maybe the best attendance we've had was, 35 people. And that would be the high end of what we've had over the last couple of years. So just so you know, that's kind of where I'm coming in and saying small church. Definitely sub 100 is what I'm considering small church. I know others will say sub 200.
Sub 2, yeah.
I mean, when we're getting into triple digits, I can't even fathom that yet. So I'm still in the double digit range. And part of that double digit range of small churches is that means we also have smaller budgets. And so when we've got smaller budgets, we're trying to really be hyper-focused on the stewardship aspect of what it is that we're purchasing for equipment and for tools, if the church can even afford to do it. Or maybe we're like many other pastors and like myself, where the equipment that the church uses is the equipment that I have purchased myself. And
yes
and amen to that one, right, Jarrod?
Yes, amen.
So
my church is really benefiting from this.
Yes. So when we're doing that, that's where we really start to look at this, and because then it's like it's our money, and it's like we're putting this forward, and we want to make sure that it will serve the most amount of needs. Most cameras, and we're going to be talking primarily, I think, from my perspective, I think that the platform and the type of camera we should be looking at should be a hybrid type of a camera that does video as well as photo. Would you agree or disagree with that statement, Jarrod?
I agree, because like you said, you want to vary your content. I mean, if you're video first, video is king right now. But I mean, we're in 2022 as of the airing of this video, and you still write things down. We're still reading books, so the written word hasn't gone anywhere. Pictures are still around. They're supplementary. So every now and again, you're going to need a headshot. Every now and again, because you're a one-man band, you're going to need to take pictures or photographs of that show that you couldn't film because the lights were out, but you caught a couple backstage cast members, and you're going to want to have photo. So make sure that it does both at some level. I don't think it has to be split, an even split
Right.
photo video camera. So you're not looking for bifunctional. I think you need to. This is just my recommendation for this stage. So catch me if I'm going too far, Josh.
Mhm.
But it needs to be video first. I would recommend video first.
Yeah.
So something like the FX30
Right.
would lend itself more to a video first type platform.
Yeah.
You're not going to want an older, Rebel, or help me out,
The
a
T7i
60,
yeah.
yeah, T7i 60, those picture first
Yep.
platforms that really aren't going to help you out in video because their files, you don't know this yet, those files are monsters.
Right.
And they just, when you try to do that, a picture first, I want to say camera, a picture first camera is going to be fighting to try and put things into video format, whereas video first, they thought through that element. They know you want video first, so they're going to try and put those codecs into something that you can easily use and post. Your files and then file management, those types of things will thank you later on for going video first.
Yeah, and that's both. Where that first camera that I really started on and doing some stuff for the church, it was I want to say it was a Nikon D5100, if I remember right. And it was a photography camera. It was, I'm pretty sure it was a DSLR that my mom was looking at. She wanted to get into doing some photography stuff. So we got that and didn't even know that it would actually be able to do video until having to dive through the manual and figure out how to, adjust the settings to be able to get it to actually do it. And then it was like, I don't even remember what the format was, but the format was so horrendous on it that I had to download a specific app just to be able to convert that into something that I could then edit.
Well, see, that's the stuff that you don't need to be messing with as a beginner. I mean, you need to learn your camera, you need to learn your system for sure. Like, that's probably paramount. But that stuff discourages you from wanting to even post videos because it's like, wait, why does my image look so bad?
Yeah.
I'm not proud of posting this. So those types of things, they really limit you in the beginning.
Yep. And now, to be fair, a lot of churches, they're using cell phones. And cell phone is a great place to start, especially with most of the cell phones now. They do.
You can say the name. It's okay. You could say the name.
Yeah, I can say Google Pixel.
You can call the iPhone 13, 14 by name all the way back to 11.
Yeah, Samsung does an amazing job with all of their cameras on their phones. Some of the leaders in the industry. No, any smartphone that you've got, they do a really good job. It basically varies every 12 to 18 months who's got the leading camera quality on it, and it's back and forth. If you've got a phone that's newer than, say, even 5 years old, it's more than sufficient for what you're wanting to do. The problem that comes into much of these, especially if you have tried this at your church to live stream to Facebook using your phone, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call or you get a text message or you get a notification, and all of a sudden you get all of those chimes and sounds, and you can't use your phone for anything other than just doing that without putting it on airplane mode and then just turning on your Wi-Fi, but disabling all of the other notifications on the app so that way you can still stream. And these are phones. Yes, I know they're mini computers in your pocket, but they are smartphones. They're not meant to do video first. That is one of the features they have, but it isn't there. So when you get to the point that you're starting to look for a camera and you're starting to say, you know what, I do want to take our production quality up in such a way that we're making it look like the videos that we're trying to put out for our church, for our ministry, actually has purpose behind it. We've actually thought about this. It's not an afterthought, but it was a forethought. We want to create this stuff because we realize that's where the eyeballs are at and we're going to do it. Once we decide that we want to start to look at video first and we want to start looking for a camera, we're going away from the smartphones, and now we're actually looking at gear, real equipment in there. The next logical, step that people could set there and look at is, maybe something like I've got the Sony ZV-1. and it's a point and shoot, and they can say, well, can't I use that? You could, and it would work.
Close quarters kill, baby.
However, how are you going to use it? And this is where I think we really need to start thinking about how are we planning on using the tools that we have, so that way we can get the right tool for the job. I get it, small church ministry. Sometimes we can't find the hammer, so we're using a brick. I get it. I've done it. Sometimes we can't find a flathead screwdriver, so we're pulling out our car keys. I get it. I've done that. But it's so much better if you have the right tool for the right job. So that's where you sit there and you think, okay, what do we need? Like, when we're going to be finding a tool for our ministry, what are our needs? How are we going to be using this? That's where it comes in. You think, okay, video. So, Jarrod, what would you think is probably the biggest area that we need to be looking at for video, for cameras?
Well, let me hop on something that you said real quick, because I think it's important to note both you and I have counseled different churches.
Yep.
Churches. Different churches in pursuing this whole video thing. And I think what churches want, what the pastor wants, is he wants a system that does everything.
Yes.
Everything. They want to be able to set up in the back with a long lens and snipe that person in 4K quality, 6K, 8K quality, and they want to see elevation worship coming off of or whatever.
Correct.
Coming out of that camera. And I think before we even get into what's needed, I think if we could kind of pare that down a little bit and say, what is the one target you want to go after? Yeah. I mean, future planning for sure. We would like to be able to do this in the future, but what that main element is. Because if you're, I'm going to step on toes here because it's been a while since I've referenced this, but if you're Trey Van Camp, give that man a vlogging camera and like when he builds out whatever the church invests later on in the future for those long range things to get his sermons and stuff, great. But right now, give that man a vlogging camera and tell him not to stop and hire an editor or something to go behind him and just let the man run. Yep. Let the man run with that vlogging camera. That should be, first and foremost. But if you're Vaughn, now we need to, what he's got going on right now is amazing. Yeah. But if you're Vaughn Sanders, then he's a preacher, man. He's a teacher. He needs to go through the scriptures. He's not going to be running around in the streets with his vlogging camera. So that's a totally different set of list of needs that you're going to need to go for. So correct. Identify what right now. We're going to, let's just use Trey's example. We're going to vlog heavy, so we need to be run and gun vlog style with a hope that in the future we're able to build out maybe upon that platform, maybe with some different cameras. We're going to look into something different for that. So I think identifying that
let's touch on that real quick, because you're addressing a style of video production that could potentially require a certain feature. Like with vlogging, the one thing that you would be looking at is some form of image stabilization. And because if you're holding that camera out and you're walking and you're moving around, it's going to become quite shaky. And for the person viewing it, that becomes jarring and it makes it at times unbearable to watch because it's shaking you all over the place. Whereas if you're setting down like we're right here, we've got them set up on tripods. We don't need image stabilization with this. But if we're taking them outside of the house, image stabilization can come in handy. Can you work without it? Absolutely. You've just got to make sure that you're still creating some type of a stable environment or doing the ninja walk, to where you can try to do it, or vlogging with a gimbal to help stabilize it. So that what you're alluding to
is that there's no perfect camera. So we're going to have to balance some trade-offs here. So if you're to look at a vlogging setup for sure, you're going to say, well, I need a gimbal. I need some sort of stabilization. I need some sort, you look through a certain lens. Also, you need a certain set of lenses because you're looking through a certain lens,
Correct.
Different environments, different purposes are going to change that.
Yep. Here's the biggest thing that I would say for churches that they need to do. Like the number one, and this is where it'll start to eliminate all the competition out there. This will hone you in on just a couple manufacturers instantly. The main piece of content you should be capturing every single week is the one that you're already creating, and that's your sermon. Ask yourself, is my sermon less than 30 minutes long? Can I record less than 30 minutes long? Do I ever run over 30 minutes? Because if I do, and I have a Canon, it's going to cut off the tail end of my sermon.
Yes.
So that's one of the first things that I did, and that's why I left Canon and went over to Sony, unlimited record time, which
absolutely
the only limit on the record time is your battery or your memory card. That's it, whichever runs out first. That being said, a 6600, it has the Z battery, it works well, and I'll put in a 256 meg SD card, and that thing, I've had it recording in 4K for over 2 hours, and it doesn't turn itself off, and it doesn't overheat, setting in a church with lights on everywhere. That's the type of stuff when I'm thinking, this is a piece of content that you're recording every week, capture it somehow, because small churches, especially if you're in rural locations, you may not have the internet bandwidth to even be able to stream. So all you might be able to do is record it and then post it later. So you've got to at least be able to capture it. And that's kind of where I sat there and I'm like, okay, let's do that. So you need to start looking at unlimited record times. When you're looking at that unlimited recording, you've pretty much cut out, Canon right out the gate. Like they don't. They like to cripple it. They are a photo first company. They've said that. Yes, they have cinema lines. They do have video first sections in there. But what they want you to do at that point is not be hybrid. They just want it to be a camcorder. So let's go to camcorder. The problem is camcorders are specific for video alone. And when you've done that, now you've kind of taken the ability for you to have, a church picnic or a baptism or, a wedding at the church where you want to be able to use that to take photos as well. That's kind of the area we're finding and why we're talking about trying to have some type of a hybrid camera, something that will do more because we want to do more with less. So less money that we're spending to be able to do more and to be able to kind of build out for years. Unlimited record limit. That's one of the biggest features.
No, that is one of the biggest features. You and Diana were talking about that early on, and I'm like, it's no big deal. You just have somebody just listen to the chaos of what was going on in my mind.
Right.
Have somebody stationed by the camera so that whenever you hit 29 minutes and probably around 20 seconds, because sometimes it would shut off a little early, you might want to just press the record button and let them know that, hey, you're going to have to hit the record button. So take a good long pause in your sermon. And then wait for that to
right,
the memory to do its deal, and then hit the button again, and then it can start. And then make sure you tell them that you gotta confirm that the recording. Like, you hear all that training that goes into that. No,
right.
You need unlimited recording, and you guys were right from the get.
And
that's kind of like how that's the caving that I'm gonna hear from you whenever you make your way over to iPhones. But I digress.
We'll see. But yeah, that type of a caving, and I had that, I don't know how many different times. I even installed Magic Lantern on my Canons to be able to bypass the unlimited recording. And all that does, it doesn't actually bypass it. It's still a limited recording. It just does auto stop, auto start. And then the process is you've lost anywhere between 3 frames and 40 frames. It was I could lose anywhere from, actually, it was more than that, because I think at one point I lost 5 seconds. So, 300 frames maybe at that point. That's kind of where it became an issue. And I don't know why, but at least with my sermons, it always seemed like right around that 30-minute mark, I was making a really good point. And then when I was trying to take that one little clip, it's this isn't even usable.
You've made the point, and it's the climax of the sermon illustration, and there's just the ending, and you need that time to help smooth over what was just inflicted right there, and you're like, and they never get it. The audience who's watching online never gets it.
And it might be where our church, we don't post the video of the sermons. I record the video every single Sunday. We have it. It's all saved. It's there. It will be filed and stored. Maybe somewhere down the road, somebody will want to do something with it and they can.
Sure.
But on a weekly basis, what I will do is, even though I've got the video recording, there's another part of the video that I do want and I do upload, and that's the audio. Could you imagine if at 30 minutes, the audio just cut out mid-sentence, how you're going to splice that audio back? That was what I was doing with the Canon. I was having to go back like 3 minutes prior and find a stopping point where I could kind of blend these together and make it sound somewhat reasonable. Whereas now I can just extract the audio straight out the video and upload it because there is no stop. That's one of the big things that you'll want to look at, is finding something that does have an unlimited record. And this will be depending on the budget that you've had. There are a lot of options out there. I have found, in at least my experience, Sony to be one of the best when it comes to this. They heard from people that said, we don't like a arbitrary 30-minute record limit. I don't care about U.S. and international laws with camcorders and what taxes and tariffs. Sony was just like, okay, you don't want this. We'll get rid of it. No problem. And they got rid of it. That's what led me over there. Now, that's not the only reason that I have went to Sony. Let's dive into some more of those, because here's one of the other things. You think about a small church, okay? Small church. You don't have a cameraman. You don't have somebody back there. So if you don't have somebody back there to, I don't know, maybe try to keep your video in focus.
Yep.
You might need...
Your options are to be, which is not my skill set, to be a stationary pastor. And you've got your depth of field set up. Say maybe you're using my 2.8 lens right there. You're not going to be able to move several feet forward or backwards and still remain in focus. Therefore, you either have to have it set on autofocus, and Josh will tell you the cameras that have really, and the brands that have really good autofocus, or you gotta have somebody trained back there, really good at eyeballing, really good eyes, or you've had to upgrade to a camera system that has somewhat focus peaking that can do that manually.
Yeah,
I recommend. I sometimes because we don't have a camera operator back in our place, I'll hit manual focus because we're all quasi in a line in focus, and I'll try to remember that as I'm preaching. But I like to run up and down the stage and get down in the audience and do all sorts of stuff. So you're just gonna have to choose what you want to do. But autofocus is really good. I've noticed on Sony. Canon, they have good autofocus, and you're talking like you need to be able to turn around and turn back around and it be able to lock on. With Sony, your eyeball or your face, and with Canon, you need it to, if you move outside of its field of view and come back in, let it pick you up pretty quick. I think those two have the best. I have worked with a Panasonic, but it's a little bit older, days gone by. Can't remember the model, and it had a horrible autofocus. I mean, there was no face involved, just kind of general direction. And this right here, I'm doing it with my hands for those of you who are listening, kind of a back and forth motion. It's always hunting, always looking for where the focus should be, and it doesn't necessarily know. You don't have to worry about that on these newer model Sonans. Make it make sense. Canons and Sonys, mercy.
Yeah, you don't. And that's the thing I will say with Canon, they've always had great autofocus on there. And early Sony, like if you were on a Sony platform with their cameras, say 4 or 5 years ago, their autofocus wasn't great. Now it's great. And a lot of the comparison videos that you can find out there, they will even show side by side Canon and Sony is many times better. Like, they've got the autofocus down where it's not only capturing your face, it's capturing your eyeball. Like, and it is locking in on the eye. And I mean, you guys have probably even seen this with mine, and I've got it set up to where if I put something up in front of this screen, the lens, it automatically starts to shift the focus and it'll be on my hands. And then as soon as I pop it off, it's locking back on my eyes. And on my viewfinder, I can see that. That has been powerful, because I think my camera placement at our church is probably I don't know, 25, 30 feet away, and I've got a 50 mil lens on it, and it never loses me. It never does. The only time I've ever seen it like lose me was when somebody got up to walk back and they walked across the camera, and then it locked on their eye for a second, and then it went back and it found me. That's really the only thing. And that it doesn't matter what platform you're going to have, that's going to be an issue. And the only real solution to that is what I then wound up doing was a tripod that I could extend up even higher, so that way they stayed kind of under the focal length. But that's something like the autofocus is going to come in handy for small churches because they're not having that camera operator back there, somebody that's dedicated for that. So you can just kind of set it and forget it and trust that it will do what it's supposed to do. Or you can click manual focus, try to get it in there, try to use whatever focal tips and techniques you need with stand-ins, and you can wind up doing it that way. Autofocus is just so much easier. And that's where you sit there and say, okay, if it's not the church service, what if we are doing more things? What if we are going to be out and about with, at like a church function? Now, that's where autofocus is really going to come in handy, because you can scan and catch different people, different movements, things like that. If you're vlogging as pastor or somebody in your church is doing it, that's where that's going to help as well. So that's where the autofocus is definitely a feature that you want to be thinking about as well. What's another feature that you're thinking of, Jarrod, for churches that we need to be thinking about and considering?
It's more of a concept because it's going to relate to the whole 4K, 1080, the resolution and lenses. So I don't know if we want to bridge both of them at the same time, but the concept is you kind of need to know, right, the look. What do you want it to look like? And I would say practicality. How far do you want to be away from your subject? Yeah. Because when Joshua was talking just a second ago about, autofocus and how it doesn't lose, well, sometimes if you're far enough back, you have your camera far enough back, and someone does stand up, and the shot that you have incorporates the audience, well, they're closer. They might be the subject, the camera thinks, and so it will pick up on their face and their eyeball, and it's shifted away from the main subject. Yep. Well, in my church, sometimes they don't sit down for a second. And they've stolen the show for the online viewers for a while. It's like, hey, when you watch it back, you don't notice it in real life, but when you watch it back, you're like, that was distracting. So if you want to kind of hedge your bets on that, you can do things when you invest in maybe a 4K camera where you can punch past those items. You can get further reach on shorter lenses, and by that I mean like you have a wider lens. Maybe you have a 50, like Josh is talking about, but you're a little bit further back, and so it incorporates some of the audience. You can push past them if you lock off in a manual focus on your subject on the stage. You don't have to worry anymore about that being a thing. Or you're going to have to invest in a camera that can adapt the glass, as we like to say, the lens that is going to hit the look that you want. Mm-hmm. Again, and that's for your different styles and your different just techniques of how y'all want to film. Because again, using Vaughn Sanders as a representative, I think he has a what are those called?
Mevo.
What was that bad purchase? Mevo. Bad purchase that I made. He has a Mevo. And this is where it goes to, like, it's more the handler, that's more the operator than it is the the camera. Sometimes I couldn't make those things work to save my life. They would not work the setup that I have because we have poor Wi-Fi, poor internet, so they weren't pinging. But you can use a Mevo and you can set it up right in front of you if you have good Wi-Fi. And it casts a pretty wide view, and it can almost track you and pan with you through its digital stuff. But most people don't like to have a camera in front of them and their audience unless it is the Mevos, by the way, are this big. If you're listening online, it's the size less than your hand, a couple of fingers, 3 finger widths maybe, very small, very, very, very small. And most people don't want that. So you're going to have to, the further you go back, the better your resolution better be on your camera, and 2, the higher numbers your lens had better have, right, in order to be able to reach out and see your subject. So you need to basically define, what do I want my image to look like and what do I need to do to get there? Because the further away you go from your talent, the more expensive it gets.
Yeah. And so here's one of the other things with a lot of these all-in-one type of cameras, like a point-and-shoot camera, like my Sony ZV-1, a GoPro, your cell phone, the Mevo. There's others kind of like that. A lot of the PTZ, the pan tilt zoom type cameras, the all-in-one that have the lenses in there are going to create a limitation. There will be a limitation on them at some point. Whereas if you get a camera body, like what we're talking about, like he's got with the A7S III, like I've got with the A6600, like I'm not going to recommend with the Sony FX3 or FX30, like those, the bodies have an interchangeable lens. And because it has an interchangeable lens, your limitations are now drastically diminished. Because say you need to go right here. This 16 mil, I am just over an arm's length away, and it's giving this nice wide field of view because it is a wide angle lens. So you can get that with a wide angle lens, or 30 feet away and I've got a 50 mil at church. Or if you have to go farther away than that, you put on a bigger zoom. And they'll make zooms that pretty much go up to whatever length you want, however far away you want. Now, there's a price with all of those, but your limitation is virtually non-existent at that point, because instead of having to replace the whole unit or be locked in to a certain focal length, you can now interchange those lenses. And then beyond that, with the lenses, depending on what you want to buy and how you want to get it, you can have this, which has got the f-stop of 1.4. And all that is just the bokeh. It gives that blurry background. So it creates more of a focus on your subject. The one that I've got at church is the 50 mil 1.8. You've got the 2.8, and all of those are really good. When you get up to like my vlog lens, which is the 10 to 18, and it's an f4, it's still good. It's just not going to give you that shallow depth of field in the background. It's not going to blur it as much. So it makes more that's in focus. But that's the thing, that your lenses will really start to contribute to that. Whereas when you've got something like, the Mevo, or you've got a GoPro, or you've got your cell phone, or you've got a point and shoot camera, those are body lens combos that are all built in, and you can't interchange pieces. And because you can't interchange or swap them out, now you've created more of a limitation on it. And that's where you sit there and you think about growing. And that's where we kind of come in with this. Having done this for a while, you add to it. Like when I first got this camera, I had the 10 to 18, and that was all. Like that was the first lens that I bought. Then it was like, okay, what's the next one I need? I need it for church service, so I need something that can get me a farther distance. Where's my price at? Where's the budget? That's where I got their 50 mil, because I knew that would give me about the focal length that I needed. And then after that, I wound up getting this one. And I haven't added any more to it just because I haven't had a need to at this point. But if I ever want to, it's just a lens. Like that's all I've got to do. I don't have to replace the whole thing. I can just replace the lens. So that's something, as you're growing and as you're looking, and even when you're getting ready to buy, that's where I'm going to always recommend an interchangeable lens system. So that way, as you improve and add to the lenses, or in my scenario where I've had this A6600 for a few years and all of a sudden Sony wants to come out with a new unicorn of the FX30, if I decide I'm going to get that, I don't have to replace everything. All of the lenses that I have will still work on that. So the only thing I have to swap out is just the body. And so it's not like having to go through an entire new system. That's the things that we need to be thinking about, especially in small church ministry, as we're looking for these tools, because the stewardship aspect, we want to make the most of what we've got. So how can we stretch this out? How can we get more longevity out of it? And you'd say, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're just looking, it used to be a time when if you bought a camera, there was something new, like computers were for a bit, or cell phones. There was a new one coming around the corner that blew it out of the water. And, and it was like you were buying an ancient piece of kit, and it was, you're done with it for one season. You have to use it replace it one season. But now I think they're hitting a point where at least there hasn't been any massive breakthroughs. You can buy a system and be in it for 4, 5, 6 years. I have a, what is this, what did I call it again?
A7S3.
Sony A7S3. Good night. All the names of these things. A7S3. I love this thing. I don't see it in the foreseeable future getting rid of it. It does all the basic. There's no need, which is why I've been mad at Diana because she's pushing this FX30. There's been no need outside of for my own personal business to have a backup cam, to replace this deal, or to find something new. So I would totally agree in that if you found something that was in your price range that did, you knew what your use case was, and that was your camera, you could comfortably be in that thing and swap out the pieces for 4, 5, 6 years.
Correct.
The industry is not going to pass you by. You're going to be fine posting on social media until, they come out and say it's 4K and we're promoting 4K video only.
Yep.
You've got some time. We don't have the infrastructure to handle that.
Well, and that's the other thing, like I wanted to touch on, because you had kind of brought up the 4K, the 8K, and all of that stuff. And I wanted to kind of touch base on this real quick. Just sometimes there are these companies that are putting things out and it is hype. Like here's just a quick little example. I went over to bestbuy.com, and I might even be able to pull this up so you can see this. I typed in 4K TV. At bestbuy.com, there are 446 items there that they've got to put in. But if I type in 8K TV, there's now only 27. If people are going to be trying to get us to switch over to 8K on video recording, you would think that we probably need at least some type of an 8K device to be able to play said video. And when these companies don't even have the production volume of the devices to be able to contain it, we're good. It's a few years out before anything switches that way. When the vast majority, I mean, we're talking, what is that? Like 20 times the amount of 4K versus 8K. If your camera does 4K, you're set. Like you're set for a while. And in a more specific use case for those that are doing digital ministry and using YouTube, the largest creator on the platform, Mr. Beast, does not upload any of his videos in 4K. He's still uploading everything in 1080p. So if your camera will do 4K, you're set. Like you're good to go. So that's kind of the things that you want to start to look there and say, okay, well, this is 8K, but at an 8K recording, why is it really worth it? And then keep in mind the actual production of that, because now you've got to have a device that'll actually record or edit and then export that 8K, and you're going to have the internet bandwidth to be able to upload it. And in rural America, you're not going to have that. And unless you've got the latest and greatest devices out there, you're not going to be able to edit it. So you don't have the infrastructure, the back end to be able to handle that stuff. Don't need it. 4K.
You don't need it.
More than enough. And then the only other thing with like the 4K is, you sit there and you look at maybe, the frames per second. So the frame rate that you could potentially record in. Why would you need super high frame rates of 120, 240 frames per second? Why would we need that in church use, Jarrod?
Oh, to preach your sermon in super slow-mo. You hear every... Yeah, it would take forever.
Yeah.
120? To slow things down. That's why you want higher frame rates, or to give it an incredibly smooth look. But right now, if you were to record 120 at 4K, I think that's a handful of cameras that can do that, and they would be on fire by the end of your hour-long sermon. That's just silly.
You've got one that will record 4K 120.
4K 120, but you don't want to put your hand to that thing whenever it's been cranking for 10 minutes or so. It is hot.
Because you're pushing it to its limit for that.
Yeah.
Here's the only time that I have recorded, I think it was 4K, actually it might have been 2.7K at 120 frames per second. So the only time I've done 120 frames per second for church water baptisms, and that was with a GoPro.
Yeah.
And all I wanted was I just wanted the slow motion. Actually, I did I think I
One
still
of my
had
favorite shots in history.
Yeah. And actually, I did that not just with the GoPro in 120 frames. I did it with the camera up top that was outside of the pool as we were going down too. And that was just because in that moment, to slow things down, like, because I was sitting there thinking, okay, water baptism is a quick event. Like it's fast, but I wanted to make the most of this moment and slow everything down because it's such a, profound spiritual event for us that's one of those things. But other than that, you don't really need it. Now, for future proofing, for some events like that, that's where slow motion can come in handy. And that's where having 120 frames per second is good. My A6600 that I have, it will do 120 frames per second in 1080p. And that's good, but I don't believe I get any audio when I do it that way. I think it's just video, and that's one of those limitations. Now, do I need that? Not necessarily. If that's the use case, if I'm just looking for the visual, I wouldn't necessarily need that. However, if I didn't know if I wanted it and I wanted to capture the whole thing just in case, that's where, again, a limitation. And I think the thing for us when we're trying to find all of the features that we would need, try to plan out what are some of the use cases that we would be using this for, and try to prevent as many limitations as possible. We want to create the fewest amount of burdens that we have so that what we wind up purchasing will build us through and will wind up lasting. A couple other things that I just want to put out there real quick that I think are features, and I want to kind of wrap up on some of this time, that these are just some high-level features that I think we need to be looking at and not discounting.
Yes. Screen. Yep.
Flip out, flip up, whatever you've got. Yours flips out and rotates. It's fully articulating. Yes. Mine just flips up, does the 180 on it. As long as you... How what?
No, I mean, like, I get it. But for my use case, when I think about what we do, I don't know how you do what you do.
I had to get a relocation plate to move the cold shoe because I can't stick my microphone on it now.
Yeah.
Because the microphone would be blocking the screen, and then the screen wouldn't flip up all the way because it'd be running into the back of the mic. So that was a limitation on this, and I had to buy something in addition to help get around that limitation. Yeah. But having some type of an articulating screen is handy if you're one-man show doing it yourself, or if you've got a guy or gal that can run the video so that they could be looking around at the screen to be able to see where it's pointing and where it's looking at and have a little bit of flexibility.
I would say it's crucial. Yeah. I mean, I know we're talking about some side elements here, but if you are doing it yourself, it is near crucial, at least that it flips up that you can see itself. Because there are some cameras, some older ones that are just, it's fixed in the back. And people have to get very creative with mirrors and stuff to find out if they are in frame and where they're at in frame.
Yep.
So if you're trying to copy a look, or if you have something in your mind that you're going for, you're going to want to be able to see yourself in some way, shape, form, fashion.
Yeah. And to be able to have some type of a display on there where you can get a quick reference and a quick readout. I use it all the time on Sunday mornings because I've got a few different presets, one for in the studio, one for out vlogging, one for at church, all different lighting setups, the color profiles, all that stuff. The white balance is already set. And I need that, and I need to be able to look at it real quick and do a reference. Yeah. So yes, having some type of a screen and an articulating screen, very important. Another thing that churches aren't thinking about, and they probably should, is having a system that will allow you to do USB streaming from the camera. Because let's say that you want to actually stream your church service, but you don't want to go spend an extra $150 on a cam link to be able to take the feed and then put it through and have to buy an extra HDMI cable to be able to do that, and make sure that you actually have a camera, Sony, that will give you a clean feed out, unlike my Canon M50, which never did. So you got to try to figure out how to do that.
He's not sour about it.
No, the new Sonys, the one thing I like about them is they're doing that. Like I've got this, it's a micro USB, and I can feed that out, and it will give you the same image that you see right here, only in a lesser resolution because I'm running the Camlink 4K through that, but it'll give you a lesser resolution, but it will stream what the camera sees without any displays or dialogues just by a USB cable. The newer ones, your A7S III, and the one that I'm not recommending, which is the FX30, not recommending, recommending.
Yet.
That one, they will do that by USB-C, and if I am correct, it actually does 1080p through that, where this one I think is 720p is where it maxes out, and some of them are even like 480, and that's where they cap those through USB streaming. But through the USB-Cs that do the streaming, and not only streaming the video feed, but it's also powering your camera at the same time through that same cable, which then it kind of eliminates one of those other things about battery, which your cell phone, your battery is going to drain if you're trying to use that. A small little point and shoot, your battery is going to drain if you try to use that. A GoPro, it's going to drain if you try to use that. Something like this with a bigger battery, it'll last. And then if you have the USB charging, last even better. Those are some of the things that I don't think we're often thinking about. And one other thing that I'm a little envious of you, and it's why I might have to buy the camera that I'm not recommending, which is the Sony FX30, dual SD card slots.
Oh, I don't know how we ever lived in that caveman state before it.
I've got one, and I don't know how many times. Actually, this Sunday was a perfect example where this was full. I hadn't cleared it off, so I had to last minute run to the office, pray, and be thankful that I had a backup. Because otherwise, I would have had to go take this, put it into my MacBook, and then try to take footage off of it just so I had enough. However, yours and the FX30 that I'm not recommending, dual SD card slots, and the C-Fast Express, and dual on those.
Don't even worry about that, folks. Don't worry about that. That gets out of hand. It gets.
All I'm saying with that, if you don't know what it is, that's fine. Future proofing for your memory. Yes. And here's one other thing, Jarrod. You were kind of mentioning, 120 frames per second, whatnot.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes that makes these things rather hot. Diana's sitting here in the chat, and she actually kind of mentioned one of the other features of the camera that I'm not recommending.
It has
the
a fan
Sony FX30. It has a built-in fan to keep it cool.
I saw it.
So
I saw it.
Ultimately, when you're looking for a camera for your church, for your ministry, look for and here's one other thing I don't even think we mentioned about the actual form factor. Your A7S III is a full frame. Yes. My A6600 is a what do they call them?
ASPC.
APS-C.
APS-C, sorry.
Yes. Basically a Super 35 type of thing. The one that I'm not recommending, the Sony FX30, is an APS-C. I do recommend for solo content creators and for small churches, APS-C is a platform for one main reason, two main reasons, the biggest one being the price. The lenses that you can get for the APS-C cameras are by far a lot cheaper than the full frame type lenses that you would be getting. Now, if you get the full frame lenses, they will still work on an APS-C. If you're on Sony, it just provides an extra crop. It's like a 1.5 crop and punch in on the focal length, which I use to my benefit. That's how I get the 50 mil to work over that distance, because it operates like a 75 mil at that point. But it's not only that, APS-C cameras and their lenses are much lighter.
This is it.
They are much lighter. Like, I would have no worries about setting this with the little weight that it has in the hands of a teenager, run around with it, record, film, have fun. If it was like something, toys. Yeah, if it was something that was heavier, like your A7S III with those big lenses on it, no, I'm not sure I would be comfortable that, because then we're also looking at a huge price difference, and you're essentially looking full frame equivalent. And I'll use this, the Sony FX30, which I'm not recommending, compared to its big brother, the Sony FX3, which is the full frame equivalent. The FX30 that'll be dropping later this month, that I'm not recommending, is got a list price of $1,800. Its big brother, the full frame equivalent, is $3,900. So When I'm a small church pastor and this has got to come out of my pocket, I'm going to go with the thing that isn't as expensive and still will do everything I need it to do, and then some.
Oh, I'm a gear junkie. I'm going to get it one way or the other. It's just going to happen. But my selling point would be it's light.
It's light.
Forget that noise.
Yeah.
Carrying these cameras around. No, thank you. We're all aging through this life. We're getting older. Backs are breaking. No, thank you.
Yep. So ultimately, I guess if I were to recommend a camera for you, I will now recommend the FX30. And will I buy it? Maybe.
Yes. It depends
Possibly.
on how much. I would say I give you a 75% chance that you're going to buy it. The only 25% chance that you don't is because you're stubborn, and it would just be to stick it to Diana and Jarrod that you're not going to buy it. But
and I was telling Jarrod even before we went into our pre-show or the pre-show, I was telling him that I was happy. I did my research on what would I need and what are all the bells and whistles that I would need for a camera. And my A6600 does that. And it would still last me for a few more years. I don't need to replace it. That being said, having it and having had it for a few years now, if there were things that I would want and things that I would be looking at, and if I were to build out my ideal camera, what would it look like? Sony did it with the FX30.
Yeah.
They created the camera that I never thought any other platform was going to create, and I thought I was going to have to continue to make compromises. With the FX30, I won't have to make any compromises. I know others will, because they'll sit there and say, well, I only want to do full frame. I don't want to do APS-C. And if that's you, that's fine. I get it. I understand it. Go with the big brother, the FX3 then, if that's what you want. But for me, for my use case scenario, for where I see my church, my ministry, this digital ministry, where I see that going, there's nothing that they could add to the FX30 that I would really need. I've been racking my brain for the last week, trying to figure out, but do I want to? Do I need it? Do I need it? No, this will work. That would be the only thing, is whether I'll spend it because I don't need it. But when it comes to what we were just talking about, future proofing, I know that there will be coming in the next few years a limitation to this A6600, and I will need to upgrade at that point. So that's where I'm going through and trying to make the decision now. Do I want to go ahead and just upgrade now and then extend that out a few more years beyond that with the FX30? Or do I want to hold off and then see if there's something? But that's where I keep coming back to, what would they release that I would want that they haven't already released in this? And that's where I just haven't found it yet. Still some time. But to answer Vaughn's question right here, I'm curious if Josh would recommend the FX30. Yes. Hey, I want to get to a couple of these comments here before we wrap up here. Let's see. What about Canon? If you go, this is John, go to the EOS webcam utility and just stream to the computer that way. So that's the thing. Canon does do that, the EOS webcam utility. The one thing that has frustrated me, because I used that for a while, I kept having lots of issues with their webcam utility.
Yes.
I'm sure it has improved than when it was, but I will say, when I was having issues trying to get that to work, and then I got the Sony, as soon as I plugged it in, at least with Ecamm, which is what I use to stream, instantly took off and I never had any issues. It didn't create any problems. So that's one. I also know that the EOS webcam utility back then, it was limited on the resolution that it was giving out. And that's the one thing, looking at those type of resolutions, the cable matters. So if it's a micro USB, you're going to get a lower resolution than a USB-C. Thus why I wasn't, but I am now recommending the FX30. Brian Sarosa, I'm a one-man band. We get it. Hey, one-man bands are those things where you definitely got to think about it. How are we going to run it? As far as budgeting and stuff goes, and with us as pastors having to do it, I do like a point that Diana makes here. She says that the church always has the ability to budget gear if a church, they can convey them vision as to why you need the camera. $2,000 over 30 people is only $67 per person. It is possible. And yeah, I think that's the other thing that a lot of small churches don't do very well, is they can't convey very well the need and the vision for it. They often don't do that. And I think a lot of that comes down to the pastor being able to cast the vision, because part of that is you've got to buy into the vision. And sometimes you haven't bought into the vision until you've started to taste it and experience it. And once you see the fruit from it, then it's easier to convey it. So that's where, at least in my experience, that's been some of the dilemma. It's like, I wasn't going to tell people to come on board and help support, $2,000 for a system when I wasn't even sure how it was going to work. Yeah. So that's one of those things, but I do get it. John asking, what frame rate was that in with losing the video? I'm guessing what he was talking about was when I was mentioning with the M50. You think?
No, I thought he was talking about your vlog where you... Am I getting mixed up here?
Maybe.
Yeah.
If it was when
Clarify,
I had
John.
the Canon M50 and I lost the video on that, I'm pretty sure all I ever shot was in 24 frames per second. Maybe 30. I would occasionally do that. But those are pretty much the only frame rates that I would do.
Yeah, we just now started shooting 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Canon R7 and R10 can record over 30 minutes now, though, thankfully. There you go.
Yeah.
So,
what's the price tag on that?
Don't want to look it up. Vaughn's saying that we just had a consultant come in, recommend AV equipment and placement. We've had too many issues with our Mevo.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had so many issues with our Mevo, and Vaughn's like, nah, man, I'm living the dream over here. Love this Mevo. Look at it cranking out content. I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong with this thing? Good to hear, Vaughn. Thank you. Sorry to hear. Wished it would have worked out the whole time, but man, I'm glad to know that I'm not just crazy pants. Max distance.
Max distance from the stage and to mount the camera recommendations.
Look,
it all depends on your what lens you're using.
And what you want it to look like, yeah.
Yeah. And quite frankly, like one of the next lens that I will wind up purchasing for my Sony system is most likely going to be that Tamron 17 to 70 f2.8. And that'll be the one that I'm definitely using for church. Because then I've got my 10 to 18 and then I've got 17 to 70, so I'm good. But the other thing that Canon does, because they have like a 6K sensor with the APS-C ones, and then it kind of crops in to give you the 4K image, they have a clear image zoom, and it will punch in another 1.5 on top of that. So
that's Sony, not Canon.
Oh yeah, Sony, sorry.
Yeah.
So with that clear image zoom, that would essentially, if you figure I've got a 70 mil plus an already APS-C 1.5 crop on there is going to be like 105 mil. And then you do the clear image zoom up to another 1.5 on top of it. You're essentially looking at like 160 mil focal length. So that should get you close to 100 feet. Maybe ish. So
depending on what you want to look, yeah. Depending, are you wanting like a shoulder shot? Are you wanting a full body? Right. Those types of things. Because I've got a 70 to 200 on my full frame, and just so that is what it is. And we're approximately 100 feet away, and that can get too tight.
Yeah,
it just depends.
Yep. So yeah, that's the good thing with the interchangeable lens systems. You can get whatever you want. But yeah, that's been the biggest obstacle, how much we'd have to zoom to get into the shot. The thing that I would recommend is, one, figure out where you would want to place the camera, and then what the distance is, and then call up some friends, a Joshua, a Jarrod, and say, hey, what distance do you have? What lens do you have? Can you tell us what focal length you would recommend, especially whether it's on APS-C or full frame, and just kind of go from there. And then once you've got that, if you're confident that it'll be the right thing for you, go ahead and buy it outright. If not, you can do a lens rental. Keep in mind, most places you can still get a 30-day back refund on it if it's wrong. But yeah, a lens rental would be a great option for it too, which that's actually
that would be
the
great.
step that I will make in getting that Tamron is I will go through like a lens rental to get it just to make sure it's going to do what I want. And then I'll buy it directly from them at that point.
It can feel like a waste of money, but you don't want to outright buy something and then not be able to use it. That's worse.
Now, if you knew it was one of two and you're pretty sure it's this one, but just in case you're wrong, it'd be this one. I might, if it was that case, I might go ahead and just buy the one that I'm pretty sure it is. And then if it wasn't, know that I can return it. But lens rental would be a whole lot easier. Vaughn saying, I just picked up a Sony AX43A Handycam, Sony in their naming, to connect to vMix, see how that works. So there's one of the other things. I guess I didn't even think about this. We do have a Canon Vixia like Handycam camcorder down at the church that we use, but that's only for like internal projection in the like children's church and nursery rooms. Because the picture quality on them is just not nearly as good. But I do know that Trey Van Camp had been using some of those Handycams, the Sony ones. I don't know if it's the exact one or not, but that looks familiar. And he had been using those for his church. And that's the other thing, that they do have, that zoom. So that can come in handy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I mean, and that's the thing, if I was going to have like dedicated stuff at the church, that might be something I was doing if that's in there. And if the church has got the budget, by all means.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Well, he streamed first, as I recall, right, Vaughn?
Yeah.
You're just so that's going to be perfect.
Diana, laugh out loud. Mevo is how churches get swindled unless you're outside or the quality isn't the priority. There was another one of those companies, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like a robotic camera thing.
Was it like Pixio or which one was that one?
Well, it wasn't the Pixio. That's the one I've got, but it was like the Pixio, but it was
we wore the badge and you walk back and forth and it tracks the badge.
There was something like that was a built-in camera system, and I had been looking at that for churches, and then come to find out that they even say this is for outdoor use only, which means that they're relying a lot on like contrast detection, I'm guessing, to be able to isolate and locate where it's at. I don't know. Diana, we had to upgrade the internet and Wi-Fi to get decent quality. It served its purpose. And that's the thing. Some of this stuff that you buy, it's just going to be for, seasonal thing. And that would be something else to look at. Like if you're looking for future proofing, if you don't know what you're going to be using and you don't know all the use cases, then maybe just get something that's a little bit easier and more of an entry level right now. If that's the case, that's where I still recommend the Sony ZV-1. It is a point and shoot. It is kind of entry level stuff. You're not going to be able to really do a full sermon on it unless you attach a battery pack to it to try to feed the power. Then it might be able to do it, but it'll give you a good idea at least of what some of the use cases you could be using would be without being like a Mevo where you can only use it for a season and then pitch it and it's gone. Let's see. Brian Sarazosa, thanks guys for the podcast today. Catch you later. Diane, FX30 built-in fan. Yep. Oh yes, and dual SD card slots are a joy. I know.
Hey, I didn't say it earlier, but you still run into the same problems that you had. You just have 2 cards now.
Well, yeah. It probably will be. Weight is everything. The A7 IV had me shaking with the 70 to 200, which
That's
I love.
a beast.
Full frame requires me to build up some muscles. Yeah, we were talking about how unless you're like jacked like Peter Lindgren, it's not going to happen. 100% peer pressure coming down from me. And you guys know me well enough. I don't really succumb to peer pressure that well, but I will say that I was telling, I think Genevieve the other day, actually, and my brother as well, because he had called me and I was talking to him about the FX30, and it was like, I've got notes somewhere. What would my dream camera be? It would have all of these things, and now the FX30 comes out, and it's like, well, it had all those things and then some. Mm-hmm. So maybe. Just razzing for doing it on the cheap because that's how a lot of churches are. Honestly, a lot of churches do that. We do, yeah.
We do.
But Probably when you dropped a few seconds, not having it usable. So usually when my frame rate, like when I'm recording, it's dropping that stuff. The only issues I've had with it dropping a few seconds was just during the record limit. And that might have been where it was a different time. I couldn't get it to replicate. That was the thing with the Canon when I had Magic Lantern for the auto start. It was set every single time. It was the exact same lens, exact same settings, and I'm pretty sure it was 24 frames per second. Sometimes it would be like 1 or 2 frames, and you would never notice it. And then the next, it would be a couple seconds. So, Diana, R7, $1,900. Canon R10, $1,100. And it's Canon. Enough said. We're probably looking at 45 to 50 feet from the pulpit, from back to the pulpit. Yeah, so in that, you know what? I might even try that. I'll see where we're at on that stuff, and I've got the ZV-1 because that's a 28 to 70, I think, on it. Maybe. I don't remember. I thought it said somewhere, but I can't remember. Yeah, I'll check. But I would venture to say that 70, 75 mil should definitely get you in that range where you would be wanting. And I can even check that with my A66 and the Nifty 50 on it because I can do the clear image zoom, which will take me up to 75 equivalent on APS-C body. But yeah, you do that too, Jarrod. Check it out. Let's look at like 45 feet, tape it off, and we can just take some still frame kind of things where give John an idea of what it would look like with full frame, what it would look like with APS-C. So.
I'll do it Sunday.
Anywho, Vaughn saying, by the way, based on your discussions, I've been talking more with my folks about digital ministry and many excited and amazed by the reach our little church has. Yeah.
That's cool, isn't it?
Yep.
That's one of the fun parts of this whole thing. It
is, because when they start to see how it's impacting people and the reach that you have, I mean, like to think small churches, you know, that, hey, we're not even hitting triple digit in attendance, but we're hitting like 4, 5, 6 digit more in reach. And it's on pretty much every continent except for maybe Antarctica. You know, it's like what we're doing, it goes all around the world. Like that's amazing. Yeah. The age that we're in.
Indeed.
All right, Jarrod, any more parting shots you got?
I got nothing.
All right. Well, that's all I got too. So I guess until next time, stay blessed, enjoy God's best, have a fantastic week.